Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is the Current Podcast.
Wildfires, hurricanes, drought. Almost daily, we hear about extreme weather events linked to climate change. But those changing weather patterns are also affecting what grows where. Canadians across the country are more and more able to grow everything from citrus fruits and avocado to saffron. According to the federal government's recently updated plant hardiness zones map, we're seeing plants thriving in places in this country where they wouldn't have survived before. And this presents both opportunities and challenges for gardeners and farmers. We're going to talk more about those zones in a moment, but first, Bob Duncan has been growing citrus trees on Vancouver Island for the past 30 years. He is in Sydney, BC. Bob, good morning.
Good morning, Catherine.
Now, I hear citrus, I think like Florida. What is it you are growing there?
So we're growing a full suite of citrus and other typical Mediterranean tree fruits. So in other words, we're growing lemons, limes, yuzu, mandarins, navel oranges, kumquats, grapefruits, pomegranates, loquats, olives, guavas, and most recently, avocados.
What's a loquat?
A loquat is not a kumquat.
They get very offended if you make that mistake.
Well, people hear the quat part and they get it confused. So a loquat is a subtropical fruit that's commonly grown in Japan, China, and throughout the Mediterranean basin. It's an orangey yellow fruit, slightly looks like an apricot. Oh, yeah. 2 or 3 seeds in the middle and very tasty. And it blooms in the middle of the winter. It blooms in January, February, and March.
You must get some extraordinary reactions from folks. Like, I know you have better weather out there than we do here in central Canada. But do people's jaws drop sometimes when they see your loquats?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a big lemon tree growing against the south wall of our house, which faces the road. Mm-hmm. So when people drive into our driveway, the first thing they see is a lemon tree with hundreds of lemons. In other words, the tree is yellow with fruit. You don't have to look for the lemons. They're just there by the hundreds on the tree that measures about 7 feet high by 7 feet wide.
What made you decide to start doing this? Sorry, Bob.
Some years ago, I noticed that citrus is commonly grown in parts of the planet where frost is a normal occurrence. You know, most of us as Canadians, we just think of the catastrophic freezes that occasionally happen in Florida. And we don't stop and think that in California or Spain or Italy or Greece, where citrus is also commonly grown, frost is a normal occurrence. So if you're in Seville or Spain or in the Central Valley of California, someplace like Fresno or Bakersfield, where you can see citrus as far as the eye can see, frost is quite a normal occurrence. I mean, we were in Spain in the citrus growing regions a few years ago in January. It was 1 degree at the time, 1 degree Celsius at the time. And that was just a normal day there. So that was in the morning, of course. But it just makes the point that citrus is commonly grown in areas throughout the world where frost occurs. They don't like -5 or -7 or -9 Celsius usually, although they can certainly tolerate the kind of frost that we have here in Victoria for the most part, with only rare exceptions.
I mentioned you've been doing this for about 30 years, but part of the reason we're talking about this today is that more and more Canadians might be able to take these steps because of climate change. I wonder what you have noticed about the changing climate over that time. Has it become easier to grow some of these fruits?
Yeah. So both day and nighttime temperatures I've seen a gradual warming over the years, which makes it easier to grow these things. So even though we still might have here in Victoria 7, 8, 9, 10 nights where I have to cover up the lemon tree that I described to you, it's just becoming less. It's not necessary to do that very often anymore as time goes on and the climate gradually warms.
What about the drawbacks that come with climate change when you're somebody who's so invested in gardening and helping plants thrive? What sort of challenges have you seen?
Well, 4 or 5 years ago, we had what was locally described as a heat dome. We had the warmest temperatures Victoria's ever exposed. It was more than 40 degrees Celsius. My cherries were ripe at the time, and some of them actually cooked on the tree. Wow. So there's a disadvantage of climate warming. But on average, it just makes it easier and easier to grow some of these fruit tree crops that previously you would never have dreamed of being possible. So to put it bluntly, if climate change allows me to grow lemons and limes and so on, I'm going to take advantage of that. I mean, in our personal lives, we've actually done everything we can to prevent climate warming. We are self-sufficient in terms of our power production. Our citrus is produced from energy produced by the sun. We drive an electric vehicle. I've caught the bus every day of my working life. I've done everything I can to prevent climate warming. But if it's going to happen,
might as well grow some lemons.
I'm going to grow some lemons, absolutely.
Listen, can I ask you in closing? I think some folks would be mad at me if I didn't ask you for at least one tip. Given that you run a nursery, a demonstration orchard, what is a piece of advice you would have to Canadians who are listening who might like to try something, be it a lemon, a Canadian orange avocado, something like that in their own gardens? Where should they start? Yeah, well, they shouldn't fear the concept. And, often with a very minimalistic protection strategy, you can grow plants far beyond the zone that you live in. So in our case, we actually, on the cold nights, like we do, believe it or not, sometimes get -5 or -6 here in Victoria. And when those my heart's breaking for you, Bob. Maybe for your plants, but
when those nights happen, I actually use a very low energy strategy. I use some of the old incandescent Christmas lights to generate some low grade heat. And cover the lemon with a fabric called remay or floating row cover, which farmers and gardeners are well familiar with. They are already using it to extend their zones. But it works really well with lemons and avocados when it's -5 and
I'm trying to imagine these lemon trees covered in Christmas lights. It's an incredible image. Thank you so much, Bob, for taking the time to tell us about this. Pretty extraordinary.
Oh, you're very welcome, Kath.
Bob Duncan is the co-owner and operator of Fruit Trees and More, a nursery and demonstration orchard he runs with his wife, Verna, in Sydney on Vancouver Island. Well, there's no chance of growing avocados or pomegranates in Saskatoon right now, but the new plant hardiness maps mean there are some new possibilities. Christy Peters is an avid gardener and a chef at two popular Saskatoon restaurants, Primal and Pop Wine Bar. Good morning.
Good morning, Catherine.
So tell me about your garden, Christy. What are you growing that might surprise folks a bit?
Oh, well, our garden, I'm just using it to try new varieties of things that aren't usually able to be found in Saskatoon. Like things that are more unusual, nothing crazy, but like purple asparagus or golden raspberries and heirloom tomatoes that usually haven't been found in Saskatoon markets and stores.
I heard you had a bumper crop of melons a few years ago. Tell me about that.
Yes. So I've been trying to grow melons for years and years and without success. And I know that people have had success, but 2 years ago, I had more cantaloupes than I could handle, and they were just huge and ripe and juicy and amazing. So I was shocked.
So there are some new opportunities, but as we were discussing with Bob, obviously there are challenges too. What are some of the challenges you've confronted as you've tried out some of these new species?
Yes, well, I've tried some purple radicchios and things, pink radicchios that I've seen in markets in New York and Copenhagen and bigger cities. And I've been trying it for about 4 years now, and I've had other farmers try it with the seeds I've procured as well. And they just don't turn pink here. They turn into these giant bitter dandelions.
Oh.
So
maybe they need some Christmas lights.
Yeah, exactly. And then I've also noticed with some of the flash rains, flash floods kind of happening that last year I got a slug infestation, and not the little tiny slugs that I'm used to in Saskatchewan. It was almost like BC sized slugs, so I was pretty shocked about that as well. But I just ripped the entire row of carrots out that was infested, and the birds went to town and ate all the slugs. So it was handleable.
Do you think, I don't know if it's those slugs in particular, but do you think climate change has been affecting the pests that are showing up in your garden?
I have noticed a bit more lily beetles and potato beetles, but I think they've always been around. So I'm not too sure about that.
What I don't know if you're ready to go full loquat, as we just heard from Bob, but in terms of the opportunities for what to grow next, particularly as there is a bit more of a focus on how the growing zones are changing, what do you have in mind for new opportunities for your garden?
Well, I'm really leaning into perennials a lot more, and so I'm wondering about different varieties of grapes and if we could grow some wine grapes or something around here, but other than that, I'm not really sure. I'm just going to try to keep pushing the limits and explore with different kinds of heirloom melons and just see where I can take it.
What's been the most, out of all those things, they all sound like such a beautiful rainbow, the most delicious thing you've been able to pull off in your garden that surprised you?
I don't know that surprised me, but...
the last thing you were excited about then?
Yeah, well, honestly, I'm maybe just boring, but it's the golden raspberries for me. Like, they're just so big and plump and beautiful. And I've tried to grow like a blackberry variety as well, because I have red raspberries on one side and golden raspberries on the other, and the goldens are just prolific. So I was happy about that. So I tried a blackberry and it did not work at all. So maybe someday.
It sounds at a minimum, it's interesting and sometimes yielding some delicious results. It sounds like. Christy, thank you for taking the time to tell us about your garden. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Christy Peters is a chef at two popular Saskatoon restaurants, Primal and Pop Wine Bar. She grows a variety of vegetables and fruits, as we heard, at her test garden nearby. Well, let's talk a bit about the bigger picture here, these growing zones. Joining me now is Dan McKenna. He is a research scientist for Natural Resources Canada and helped update the new plant hardiness zones. He's in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Catherine.
So were you surprised by anything you heard there in terms of the things that folks are growing across the country?
No, that was quite exciting. Well, actually, a little bit of vindication in some ways. Bob out in British Columbia is having some exciting times, it sounds like. And while I was listening to him, I looked up on our website and I see that Sydney has actually changed from an 8A to a 9A zone, which suggests, more opportunities for him that he is actually doing and trying and experimenting on and having success.
So for those of us who are perhaps less gardening inclined, like I don't know the difference between an 8A and a 9A zone, how would you explain to me how big a difference we're seeing in the hardiness zones in Canada with this update?
Well, first, I might step back a little bit and just explain how they were developed. Back in the 1960s, Agriculture Canada established a number of trials, garden trials, at some 108 locations across the country with some 174 different plant species and varieties, and saw how they grew and survived, how hardy they were, and they related that to a number of different climate variables. And they came up with a statistical model that gave us a hardiness index. And so what we've done, it's basically replicate that work. They used 7 different climate variables that included things like the length of the growing season, the minimum average temperature of the coldest month, the average temperature of the warmest month, growing season precipitation, snow depth, even wind gusts. And they came up with this index that gives you a number, let's say, between 0 and 100. And so a 4 zone would be 40 to 49. And in Canada, we divide them up into 2 subzones. So a 40 to 44 is a 4A and a 45 to 49 is a 4B. Okay. So in Bob's case, they've gone up significantly, a full zone. best to be able to have these opportunities that he's doing.
Where in the country are we seeing the biggest shifts?
Well, since we first did the update, the original work was done for climate from the 1930 to 1960 era. They used a 30-year average, which is a pretty standard thing in the climate world. They're called climate normals. We updated it for the 1961 to 90 period, and then just recently, the 1991 to 2020 period. And we've found that 80% of southern Canada has increased from at least a half a zone to almost a full zone. About 20% has not changed, and there's actually been a little bit of a decline, like 1% of certain areas have declined. So the zones have mostly changed in Western Canada, which is consistent with what people are seeing in other sort of climate change studies.
I wonder, I just want to stop and ask you how you feel about all of this, I guess, Dan, because it's such a fascinating topic. We are talking about it in terms of opportunity for growers, but obviously the cause behind this is pretty unsettling. So as a scientist who is thinking about this all the time, I mean, to what extent are you feeling a bit pulled in two different directions, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Catherine. There are certain pros and cons. There's problems and challenges associated with it. I think Christy mentioned some insects and diseases that, I guess she wasn't necessarily experiencing, but there are different parts of the country that are getting exposed to more invasive plants and pests. It does create opportunities for gardeners, and gardeners are excited to try those things. That's great. One of the things I thought I might mention with this work, the hardiness zones are just one side of the work that we have on the Plant Hardiness website. We have things called species models, and these species models are much more individualized. They basically take the climate profile that we're now able to develop for every plant species that we can, and we have thousands of them on the website, and that shows us the climate habitat for things. And what this is showing is that over the coming century, the climate habitat for many tree species and other perennials could be moving up to hundreds of kilometers northward. It's not straight north, but northwards generally. So, that's going to create opportunities, but also challenges. There's not the same soils in every place. We're not saying that the plants will move in those cases, but in some cases there will be opportunities, but there will also be challenges. And we see things like the fires that are happening in Western Canada. That's obviously very, very concerning.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, sort of quite a reality check. I mean, Bob was talking about the cherries burning on his trees at the beginning of this. To focus in on some of the fruit growing, the vegetable growing, we've been talking to folks who are doing this on a smaller scale. To what extent do you think this opens up different opportunities on a bigger scale for farmers, as crops that we could enjoy at the grocery store, for instance?
Yes, well, that's another good question, Catherine. There are opportunities, but I think for people that take on these opportunities in an operational scale where they're investing large sums of money, they have to be a little bit risk averse because they are investing a lot of money. But I think that we're seeing in some parts of the country there are increases in plantings of grapes. I think Christy mentioned that in Ontario. There's changes in the areas that can support grape growing. There's a project we might be working on with Agriculture Canada that's looking at these species models for apple varieties and apple species, because they create opportunities for people in various parts of the country, but it's not a consistent change because in Canada, we have lots of different climate, lots of different influences on weather. In the United States, the plant hardiness zones that they use is just based on one variable, extreme minimum temperature. And that's something that we use in Canada to some degree, but there are all these other influences like snow cover. It's a little more complicated.
It sounds pretty complicated. And I mean, you can't, I imagine, factor in things like we've been talking about these natural disasters that obviously have enormous detrimental impacts if we're thinking about wildfires and that kind of thing. But what about pests we were talking about earlier, slugs and whatnot. Like, do you have any sense of how the changing climate also is going to bring new pests along with it that would create some growing challenges?
Interesting that you asked that question, because we have another effort in our work that involves the same kind of thing about developing species models for insects and pests.
Oh, wow.
Including things like mosquitoes and diseases, oak wilt, the mountain pine beetle that's moving west from the west out towards the east. I haven't really talked about that.
You're giving me a scoop here, Dan.
Giving you a little bit of a scoop.
Listen,
that's right. So it is interesting. Again, it's not a consistent thing. Sometimes climate change actually hurts certain pests.
Oh yeah.
So it just depends on what it is that we're talking about, and literally there are thousands of different insects and diseases that one needs to be thinking about. Yeah.
We have 30 seconds left, Dan, but I do just want to know, you're obviously passionate about this. Is there something you've seen in your own backyard of Sault Ste. Marie that's been able to grow that surprised you?
Well, I know that there was somebody here a number of years ago that was growing peaches, believe it or not. And he had success. He bore fruit, but sadly there was some extreme weather that happened that wasn't kind to the tree. So,
oh, wow.
I think that everybody's going to have a little bit of different success. People have green thumbs, and there can be things that they do that will influence their success. I think Bob even mentioned that with some of
Christmas lights, yeah.
Cultural Christmas lights. That's right. So, people have at it and
see what's
experiment.
Possible.
Talk to your local nursery, because there are people that actually have local experiences.
Okay.
These models that we have are basically long-term averages, but we know that every year is different. So everybody's going to have different experiences, and we wish them luck. We hope they have a lot of fun with their gardens.
We do too. Thank you so much, Dan, for taking the time to tell us about this today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Catherine.
Dan McKenna is a research scientist for Natural Resources Canada and helped update Canada's new plant hardiness zones.
You've been listening to The Current podcast. My name is Matt Galloway. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.